The first time Rachel asked me to pretend to be her husband. She was crying so hard she could barely breathe. We were sitting in a small coffee shop in Portland, Oregon, while rain tapped softly against the windows. The smell of fresh coffee filled the room, but nothing could cover the sadness in her eyes. Her hands trembled around a paper cup as if she was holding on to the last piece of stability left in her life. Then she looked at me and asked a question that completely changed both of our futures. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of unexpected love, please take a moment to like this video. Leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel for more heart-touching stories. I had known Rachel Carter for almost 3 years. We weren't best friends, but life had a strange way of pushing our paths together whenever one of us needed help. We worked in the same hospital in downtown Portland. I was a physical therapist, named Nathan Brooks, and Rachel worked as a pediatric nurse. Everyone loved Rachel. She was kind, hardworking, and always smiling. At least she used to be. 6 months earlier, her husband, Michael, had passed away unexpectedly after a heart condition nobody knew he had. The tragedy shattered her world overnight. The woman who once brightened every room now walked through life carrying a sadness that seemed impossible to escape. What made things worse was the situation she found herself in afterward. Michael's parents had never truly accepted Rachel. They blamed her for things she couldn't control. After his death, they became even colder. They constantly questioned her decisions and tried to influence the custody of her 6-year-old daughter. Sophie. Rachel was exhausted. She was grieving, working long hospital shifts, raising a little girl alone, and fighting a battle she never wanted. That rainy afternoon, she finally reached her breaking point. Her husband's parents were hosting a large family gathering in Chicago. Rachel had been told she needed to attend if she wanted to avoid more legal complications regarding Sophie. The problem was that everyone there viewed her as weak and vulnerable. She was terrified. That's why she looked at me with tears in her eyes and asked if I would pretend to be her husband for one weekend. At first, I thought she was joking. Then I realized she was completely serious. The request was crazy, awkward, complicated, and somehow heartbreaking. Rachel wasn't asking because she wanted attention. She wasn't playing games. She simply wanted someone beside her, so she wouldn't have to face the storm alone. For a long moment, I stared at her. Then I smiled. The tension in her face softened slightly, and that's when I asked the question that made her laugh through her tears. I told her that if I was pretending to be her husband, I needed to know whether I was allowed to kiss my wife too. For the first time in months, Rachel genuinely laughed. That laugh changed everything. 3 days later, we flew to Chicago. The entire trip felt surreal. We rehearsed simple details during the flight. How we supposedly met, where we lived, small stories about our imaginary relationship. But something unexpected happened. The more time we spent together, the less pretending it felt. I got to know Sophie during the trip as well. She was bright, funny, and incredibly protective of her mother. Children have a way of seeing truth that adults often miss. By the second day, Sophie had already started holding my hand whenever we walked somewhere. That simple gesture touched me more than I expected. The family gathering itself was exactly as difficult as Rachel feared. The moment we arrived, judgment filled the room. Relatives whispered. People stared. Questions came from every direction. But Rachel wasn't alone anymore. Whenever she looked nervous, I was there. Whenever someone tried to intimidate her, I calmly stood beside her. And whenever Sophie felt overwhelmed, I distracted her with silly stories and games. Something remarkable began happening. The family members who expected Rachel to appear broken suddenly saw a woman who was standing tall again. Not because she had found another husband, but because she had remembered her own strength. The weekend should have ended there. We should have returned to Portland and gone back to our normal lives. Instead, life had other plans. A month later, Sophie was hospitalized after developing a severe infection. It was one of the scariest weeks Rachel had ever experienced. I remember sitting beside her in the waiting room at 2 in the morning while doctors ran tests. She looked exhausted, completely defeated. The fear of losing another person she loved was crushing her. So I stayed, every day, every night. I brought food. I helped with paperwork. I sat beside her when she cried. I celebrated with her when Sophie finally began recovering. And during those difficult days, something shifted inside both of us. The walls Rachel had built around her heart began to crack. The friendship we had carefully maintained started becoming something deeper, something neither of us expected, yet neither of us wanted to admit it. Months passed, life slowly became brighter. Sophie returned to school. Rachel smiled more often. The darkness that had followed her for so long began fading. One autumn afternoon, we visited a local pumpkin festival outside Portland. The trees glowed with shades of gold and orange. Children ran through corn mazes. Families laughed together. It was the kind of day that felt almost magical. I was helping Sophie carry a giant pumpkin when she suddenly stopped walking. She looked at me very seriously. Then she asked a question that nearly stopped my heart. She wanted to know why I wasn't her real dad yet. Children don't realize how powerful their words can be. But those words stayed with me for weeks. Maybe because deep down, I wanted the same thing. The truth was simple. I loved Rachel. Not because she needed saving. Not because I felt sorry for her. I loved her because of her strength, her kindness, her resilience, the way she loved her daughter, the way she kept moving forward despite unimaginable pain. I loved every imperfect piece of her, but I was terrified. Rachel had already lost so much. The last thing I wanted was to become another source of disappointment. Then Christmas arrived. Snow covered the city. Holiday lights sparkled across neighborhoods. And for the first time in years, Rachel looked genuinely happy. That evening, she invited Sophie and me to decorate cookies at her house. The night was filled with laughter. Christmas music played softly in the background. Everything felt warm and peaceful. Later, after Sophie fell asleep on the couch, Rachel and I sat quietly near the fireplace. The room glowed with golden light. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Then she looked at me. The same way she had looked at me in that coffee shop long ago. Except this time there were no tears. Only hope. She thanked me for everything, for being there, for helping her survive the hardest chapter of her life, for loving Sophie, for reminding her that happiness was still possible. And before I could stop myself, I told her the truth. I told her I loved her. The silence that followed felt endless. My heart pounded. Every fear I had ever carried rushed through me at once. Then Rachel smiled. A smile, more beautiful than anything I had ever seen. And she told me she loved me too. 3 months later, I proposed. Not in a fancy restaurant. Not during some grand event. I proposed in the same coffee shop where she had first asked me to pretend to be her husband. The same table, the same rainy weather, the same city. Only this time nothing was pretend, Rachel cried. Sophie cried. I probably cried too. And when Rachel said yes, it felt like every painful road we had walked somehow led us exactly where we were meant to be. Before we finish this story, I have a special request for everyone watching. Please comment below. Second chances can change lives. I'd love to see how many people still believe love can arrive when we least expect it. A year later, Rachel walked down the aisle wearing a simple white dress. Sophie scattered flower petals with the biggest smile imaginable. Friends and family filled the small church. As Rachel reached me, tears filled my eyes. Not because everything had been perfect, but because it hadn't. Because life had been messy, painful, unfair. And somehow, despite all of it, we had found each other. The minister pronounced us husband and wife. The room erupted with applause. And this time, when I smiled at my wife, I didn't need permission anymore. Near the front row, Sophie cheered louder than anyone else. In that moment, I realized something beautiful. Sometimes love doesn't arrive as fireworks. Sometimes it arrives disguised as friendship. Sometimes it begins with heartbreak. Sometimes it starts with a simple act of kindness. And sometimes the person who asks you to pretend becomes the person you spend the rest of your life loving. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories reach people who may need hope today. Because no matter how broken life feels, a new chapter can begin when you least expect it. And sometimes, the greatest love story starts with a question that was never supposed to be real.